How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today the Federal Reserve may have just killed the idea of waiting for rates. So over the last several years, headlines aside, in a real estate and lending industry that loves to tell people to hurry up and buy something, the reality is most people have been waiting for something. Waiting for prices to come down, waiting for rates to come down, waiting for the right moment. And the Federal Reserve may have just made a move that affects all of it, saying for the first time that they see in the future the possibility of the Federal Reserve rate, which impacts a lot of things, could actually go higher instead of lower. Meanwhile, home values not moving the way they have in the past. Right here in Denver, after you account for inflation, Denver homes have actually been losing ground. So for the easy reasons to buy, it'll go up, money's cheap, you can't lose, those are gone. And the reason that people have to actually plan for the future is changing. Today, we're breaking down what the Fed did, what it means for Denver, and how you can prepare for the future, and we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everett, and listen, there's two things we do here. One, we talk all things eating, living, breathing, experiencing the Denver Metro and Colorado Front Range. And as a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado, I'm teaming up with folks like you to move here each and every day. So the number and email on your screen, just know that I'm always the person here as a resource if and when you need me. All right, so June was the first Federal Reserve meeting under the leadership of Kevin Warsh, and obviously a lot of pressure, things going on overseas, inflation higher due to certain factors we'll get into. And so during that meeting in June, the Fed decided that they were going to hold the federal fund rate steady. Now, plenty of people in my industry will tell you that the Federal Reserve does not control mortgage rates, but their actions does impact mortgage rates and the 10-year Treasury. And so it wasn't just the fact that they said that rates were going to hold steady, it was the fact that they indicated the possibility that the Federal Reserve rate, a rate in which one bank loans money to another bank, could actually increase this year, which would be the first time that those had been increased since 2022. Now, a key factor for this was the fact that inflation, according to some reports, hit 4.2% in May. A lot of that being due to the fact that energy prices are high, the price of oil per barrel increasing during this conflict in the Middle East. And we've already seen, at least as of the making of this video, the price of oil drop from around $120 a barrel back into the $70 to $80 frame. So much better. However, that's still a threat to inflation. It's still a reason that the Fed is going to have some concerns about where their interest rate moves. And what this tells me is that the Federal Reserve is genuinely concerned about inflation. They have said for years their target for inflation was 2%. We have not gotten anywhere near that. We have gotten into the high twos, which I guess if they want to suddenly change their idea to high twos being still considered twos, maybe that's the case. But because we have not seen progress, and we've actually seen prices, even outside of energy, increase, the Fed is signaling for the first time that they don't feel confident about where inflation is going. That means they may have to increase those rates, which then has a trickle-down effect that typically increases what you're going to see out of rates. It's going to impact the 10-year Treasury. It's going to increase its yield, which then also tends to increase mortgage-backed securities, which is where interest rates for mortgages come from. So back in February, we had 30-year rates sitting at about 5.99% in a market that showed a lot of promise. As of the making of this video, we're right back around 6.5%, which is still workable for a lot of people, but thrilling to very few. And listen, this is something that's always going to drive me crazy anytime we talk about interest rates. Somebody is going to tell you that an interest rate of 6.5% is not a big deal because their parents had an interest rate of 12 to 14% back in the 60s and 70s, or especially I should say in the 70s and 80s, when yes, interest rates got into the double digits and stayed there. Genuinely speaking, that means bupkis to you, absolutely bupkis, because at the same time, home prices during those periods of time were much lower. Now, you could make the argument that affordability today is as brutal as it was in the early 80s, but still, that was 45 years ago. How that really benefits you now, I have no idea, and no headline and no story is going to fix that. So what's happening in Denver? Well, one, Denver is steady, not spiraling as some folks would like to tell you. The median price sitting around $615,000. That's up a couple percent over the year, and inventory is double. It's sitting at around 12,000 homes as of the making of this video. That's more than double, I should say, than what we had back in 2022. Now, we know that homes are taking longer to sell. We know that sellers are having to give up more to buyers than they have in the past or that they have over the last decade. But no, we're not seeing any indications of crash, which is again a term that people love to use, gets more of the attention. But it's really two different markets. And that's something that I'm going to continue to pound on each one of these videos. When you look at the difference between detached homes, homes that sit on their own lot, their own block, even townhomes in which you own the land, those have more price stability in them than the other market, and that is condos. And yes, to some extent, a lot of these attached homes. Townhomes and duplexes do not operate or have not had the price stability that single family homes have. Condos are a dangerous market in general, have been for a long time, even during the pandemic, where you could sell just about anything like a hotcake. Condos still held back a little bit, especially in Denver, condos in the city. Now, this idea of, again, crash, and I always use the word correction, really stems from a lot of articles that talked about Denver having nearly a double-digit correction. And Denver's been long overdue for a correction. Make no mistake about it. The Denver market was already far exceeding the national average for appreciation even before COVID. We were seeing 5, 6, 7, 8% appreciation leading into the pandemic. So prices here are basically flat. They're not crashing, they're not collapsing, they're waiting on the sidelines for the bottom to fall out. However, and this is very important because even though prices are steady, that doesn't mean that people are winning. It doesn't even mean that they are, getting a draw. This is taking place at the same time as the World Cup, so we'll use that term for a place. Really, it looks at two different yardsticks by Denver standards. So for instance, if you look at Realtor.com, Denver is up about 2.5% year over year, okay? All homes total 2.5% up. However, if you look at the Case-Shiller index, which tracks the same homes being sold again, Denver is actually down 2%. It's one of the weakest big markets in the country. Again, not collapse. It is one of the weaker big markets, large size cities in the country, based on Case-Shiller's report. So even though you have just the whole number of a home increasing, when you account for inflation, you account for other adjustments, it's actually 2% down. And that means that quietly, Denver is losing ground. Now, you could see that. You could put it on a headline and you could say the Denver market is down, and that might sound terrifying. To me, it is genuinely one of the best things that could possibly happen to Denver. Because as I mentioned earlier, even before the pandemic, affordability was becoming a significant problem in the Denver metro area and Colorado, many parts of Colorado for that matter. So the fact that we were going to lose ground is important. I also need, and I often make this visual, maybe my editor can help me here, where if you have a graph that's just going up and up and up, you never catch. Now, a lot of people expected this graph to stop going up, suddenly drop, and then continue up from there. If you look at average appreciation in Denver over the years leading into the pandemic, what you've actually seen is a flattening of what's occurring. But if that trend was supposed to continue, we would have just run into it at some point. So this correction will eventually lead us to right where we were supposed to be if the pandemic had not occurred. It is a natural progression, and the numbers are always going to come back to the mean. Now, one of the kind of beautiful things to come out of all of this is that when the numbers are kind of pushed aside, obviously buying a home is a numbers game, but when the numbers are pushed aside as far as the assumption, I'm gonna buy this house, it's gonna go up in value very quickly, and I'll be able to do all sorts of things with that money. When that is pushed aside, people really have to consider why they are buying a home. And you could make a lot of poor decisions that ended up bailing you out when homes were appreciating. So a conversation a lot of buyers buried 5 years ago is suddenly back. When easy money was doing the thinking for a lot of people, you never had to ask what the house was actually for. You bought it, it went up in value, the math covered you, that's it. You were done, no problem. If you bought the wrong house, not a big deal. Which means today the question isn't really whether to buy, it is what am I buying for? What is the purpose of making this decision? It's whether you can see far enough ahead to know why, because the payoff on a house used to show up 12 months from now it lives years down the road, really around that 5, 6, 7 year mark. And when I started thinking about that and I started looking at the data, there is this common terminology, this common phrase that is thrown around, the idea that people move every 5 to 7 years. That has been pounded like a drum in the real estate and lending industry, and the data actually does not support that. In some ways, it's close, but it doesn't necessarily support this 5 to 7 years. In reality, the typical homeowner owns their home for 12 plus years. That's actually double the number that it was about 20 years ago. In 2005, it was around 6 to 7 years. Case in point where they got that number. Today, it is 12 years. And if you stripped out all the other people except for those who sold their house, this is as of earlier in 2026. If you just take the people nationwide that sold their house, they owned that house roughly 8.5 years before they sold. So even that 5 to 7 year number does not apply to at least current days sellers who own their house for more than 8 years. And to put that in perspective, that is the longest stretch that we've seen in 25 years of data. So people are owning their house today longer than they have in the last quarter century. And listen, let's not pretend that these people bought a house and just across the board they decided to stay there because it was the best decision for them or because they love their house and they're just in a utopian spirit. Many people have stayed in their home because they're stuck. They are locked in by a rate that they can't replace, by a market that has been extremely volatile, by the fact that every time they start to look at other homes, they get worked up about a payment. The media, a lot of people that are pro-housing, which again, I am pro-housing, but a lot of folks are going to tell you, no, the rate lock-in effect doesn't exist, but the data doesn't support it. There are plenty of people who would like to make a move and they don't because of the numbers. This locks people out from moving, and it also locks first-time home buyers out from homes that they would typically be targeting, but the current residents still live there because they have to. And this flips the whole way that we think about housing around, because at the end of the day, so in many ways, this market is telling you that it's going to hand you a 12-year horizon, whether you like it or not. Now, could that number decrease in the future? Absolutely could. Lower interest rates, prices that do correct over time could certainly shrink that number. But if you start thinking about it from an 8 to 12 year standpoint, as opposed to a 5 to 7 year standpoint of owning a home, it's going to pivot how a lot of people compare renting versus owning. So more and more this conversation really shifts to, what does a house do for you? What does it mean anymore? And the first thing that comes up is the power to stay. Almost everything good about owning comes down to the downstream of one fact. You get to stay. A landlord can never sell it. They can't renovate you out. They can't have family move back in. An owner with a fixed payment can only be moved by their own decision. And that's really the honest key to all of this. It's the honest key to all of these numbers and how we're seeing them shift. And this is, again, that parallel against rent, where if the job moves, if there's a huge family shift, it's a lot harder to pick up and chase the job across the country or simply make a quick pivot. And this is also the idea that a lot of people are looking at, is that it's the fixed point of the family. It's the height marks on the door. It's the kid who learns to ride a bike on the street that they'll later drive away from to college. It's them coming back to it at Thanksgiving. And the research carefully backs this up. And this is something that I find very interesting about ownership compared to renting, is that kids do better with stability. Fewer disruptive moves. It links to better outcomes in school, links to better communication, better connections. But let's say it's straight. That is based on stability. It's not based on the idea that somebody owned a house or somebody renting a house. It was based on the idea that these kids were raised in an area where they stayed in the same place, around the same people, same schools, etc. Owning the home tends to give more of that stability. That's it. It wasn't the data of, if somebody in this house owned it for 30 years and raised their kids there, and somebody in this house rented it for 30 years and their kids raised there, that these kids would have a different outcome than this. That is not what the data supports. So where does this leave everything and some of the quick predictions for the future? Now, the Fed, again, may have threatened or suggested the idea of rate increases. I'm not a huge political person in these videos. I will tell you, I do not think there is a chance that the Fed increases any of their rates. The reason that is one, I don't think the data suggests that it's necessary. I think it's something they have to consider. They always have to keep an eye on it. But there's just not enough risk to the system and to the economic platform at the moment for them to need to raise interest rates. The other thing is this is just saying it as plain as possible. If the Federal Reserve were to raise interest rates, even 0.25%, the November elections would slide so far left that I think conservatives would pay the ultimate price. And I just don't think, and that's not to say that the Fed is political, certainly can be, but it is it's not a conservative organization, it's not a liberal organization. So for them to make a decision that could move elections that drastically would be disastrous. I think they will hold steady. I don't think they will cut rates. I don't think they will increase rates. I think they will hold steady. I think they will let the elections play out and see what happens from there. I also think they need more time. Again, as of the making of this video, we currently have a ceasefire with Iran. We currently have an agreement, but we'll see how all that plays out. Obviously, we haven't always had the most success throughout this process. So I think things will hold steady as we work through the Middle East, as we work through elections, and then we'll see what happens following November. As always, I'll tell people, higher rates if you qualify can be extremely beneficial because less competition, more inventory on the market gives you more negotiating tools. I know there are a large swath of people waiting for interest rates to come down. Certainly, there are some benefits to that. But I'll always say, the people who have the ability, key phrase, the people who have the ability to qualify for a home while interest rates are higher usually have a very solid outcome. And for those who are looking to buy in the future, and for those who own a home currently, the best I could tell you, ride out the storm. If you don't have to move currently, this might be the opportunity to hang tight to that house. You know, certainly not a market where sellers are winning out. As far as people planning to buy, it's a great opportunity to simply make the plan and be prepared. There's a lot of movement in this market. We've already seen it this year with rates dropping down to a 3-year low as late February, right back to 6.5%. We'll see how that continued volatility goes on. If I can ever be of assistance, you ever have any questions, anything you want to bounce off me, the number and email on your screen, just know that I'm always the person. Answer your calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There, when and if you need me. In the meantime, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. This was your Denver housing market July 2026 update. The Federal Reserve just killed the idea of waiting for rates. Until I see you next time, peace.